Hello Commander players, this is Jumbo Commander with another Commander deck tech. Today, it's Saskia, the Unyielding. Saskia the Unyielding looks awesome right there, doesn't she? Plus, she's got some pretty great abilities. Saskia the Unyielding, black, red, green, white for a 3/4 legendary human soldier with vigilance and haste, and when Saskia enters the battlefield, you choose a player. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to the chosen player. I'm really impressed with the design of Saskia. I think that she's going to make for really interesting gameplay because you're going to want to play around with this combat damage clause in her ability. And you know, combat damage is a very interesting thing in Commander. In any multiplayer game, being able to swing at one person, but Saskia makes you choose another person where the damage is going to, it's very interesting. And a lot of combat damage doesn't happen in Commander as much. It's not very relevant. People are playing spells more often. Most of the creatures that I play in my own personal EDH decks are 2-for-1s, 3-for-1s. They kind of attack as a secondary effect to their main goal. But Saskia can be a little bit different. It might just be all about attacking. But we might need to make these attackers more relevant. Maybe by making them gigantic. A big creature is always a threat. So having a gigantic creature rumbling across the battlefield and threatening to kind of do double damage can be very powerful. Or you can just make them very hard to block. Give them trample, give them fear, give them menace. Unblockable big creatures are very scary, especially when Saskia's doubling their damage. Another thing we can do is we can lower all the life totals of everyone at the table. If everyone has lower life, then the creatures rumbling in and the copying of damage that Saskia does can be more relevant. We might want to consider looking at some Infect builds. Maybe just a little bit of Infect. When you only have to deal 10 damage instead of 40, that can make a big difference. And the fact that Saskia can sort of double that damage to an unsuspecting opponent can make Infect strategies very powerful. You know, talking about this, attacking one player and then having it mirror to another, or, double damaging another opponent, means that I think politics can be really interesting with this commander. Okay, I'm going to attack you, but I really want the damage to go through to this other player who I've chosen. Or simply the fact that you have to choose a player when Saskia comes into play, meaning that you're choosing someone that says, like, yes, I'm going after you. Finally, I just think redirecting damage is fun. Attacking is fun, even though it might not be the most powerful of strategies, and then moving the damage around, redirecting it, doing all these politics, making big splashy creatures attack. I think this is going to be a really fun deck once we put it all together. Let's see what kind of general Saskia can be. Creature combat is going to be the name of the game in this commander deck. So I'm going to be talking about a lot of synergies dealing with combat, but first I want to introduce you to the mascot of this deck, maybe even the lieutenant of this deck. Vigor. 3 green, green, green. By the way, I love the triple green in a 4-color commander deck. We might as well embrace the mana problems that we're going to have right off the bat. Anyways, for a 6/6 elemental incarnation with trample. Okay, I like keywords like trample and haste, death touch, lifelink, all of those keywords that deal with combat, because we're going to be swinging in with these creatures. So that's not an irrelevant ability. But let's go to the real reason why he's in this deck. If damage would be dealt to a creature you control other than Vigor, prevent that damage. Put a +1/+1 counter on that creature for each 1 damage prevented this way. So Vigor allows the whole rest of our team to attack with impunity, because as soon as they attack in, we don't care what blocks are set up. Vigor's going to prevent that damage and grow your whole team bigger. And remember, big creatures are more relevant. We're trying to boost up the creature combat in this deck. Vigor also has a third ability that's downside, whatever, I don't care. Okay, we have another creature that kind of does something like this. Phytohydra. 2 green white white for a 1/1. But if damage would be dealt to Phytohydra, put that many +1/+1 counters on it instead. So again, we have a creature that can just attack whenever, and it'll grow and grow and grow. Phytohydra is also great at blocking, but hopefully we're going to find ways to pump up our team and make them very easy attackers. Vigor and Phytohydra can prevent the damage dealt to them, and then they grow. But Phantom Neshoba and the other Phantom cards are still very resilient. Let's take a closer look at this card for 5 green and a white. By the way, this card brings back so many memories. He was a house when I was younger. I used to slam Phantom Neshoba and people couldn't deal with him. He's very cool. I'm excited to swing with him again. Let's take a closer look. Again, 5 green white. He's going to end up being a 7/7. He's going to have 7 +1/+1 counters on him. He has Trample. Again, a great keyword for attacking. Also has the old version of Lifelink. Whenever it deals damage, you gain that much life. By the way, these creatures that have deals damage gain that much life, you can also have them have lifelink as well, so you can gain double life. Very fun to do. And people try to be like, well, you can't do that. No, you can do that. It's awesome. Okay, but let's get to the real issue here, is that if Phantom Neshoba is ever dealt damage, you can prevent it and remove a single +1/+1 counter. So again, it allows Phantom Neshoba to attack whenever we want to. We attack in, and if someone blocks, who cares? Take a counter off and prevent it. And this guy still has Trample, so he's trampling over, he's gaining you life, he's a relevant threat, and let's just not even imagine what happens if Vigor and Phantom Neshoba are on the battlefield at the same time. It's amazing. There's a lot of Phantom creatures out, and I think that they will all do fine. They need a little bit more of the big impact that Phantom Neshoba has. But Phantom Centaur can also be powerful. Only 4 mana, 2 green green for a 2/0. Just kidding. It comes into play with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. So this guy can swing in for 5. He also has protection from black. So again, this Phantom Centaur is immune to many of the damage-based spells that could kill him, just prevent that damage and get him smaller. But also, he could just attack through a black defender over and over and over again, just dealing 5, dealing 5, dealing 5. And also, if you have Saskia out on the battlefield, it can mirror that 5 to that opponent that you chose. These Phantom creatures are very resilient attackers, which is why we have them in the deck. There's also another reason why we have the Phantom creatures and Vigor and Phytohydra, and that's because of Blasphemous Act. Blasphemous Act is a great board wipe, but we can kind of work our deck around it a little bit. Blasphemous Act deals 13 damage to each creature, but if we have Vigor out on the battlefield, Blasphemous Act will kill Vigor, and then give all of our other creatures 13 +1/+1 counters. Blasphemous Act will wipe the table and make our guys huge. It's just a game winner if we kill our Vigor with it. But also, this just stacks on the Phytohydra as well. And the Phantom Neshoba and the Phantom Centaur, we just remove a single counter from them while the rest of the board gets wiped. Wait a second, these creatures are very resilient to these damage-based effects. So cards like Fault Line and Molten Disaster and Rolling Earthquake, all of these, and Earthquake itself, there's a ton of these effects. And what they're going to do is they're going to wipe most of the board out, and we're going to leave our creatures intact, or sometimes even bigger. Also, what a lot of these spells are going to do is lower everyone's life total, making our big creatures much more relevant, making creature combat something that your opponents have to deal with. I also want to throw in Subterranean Tremors. There's a lot of new, really great board wipe cards, and Subterranean Tremors is one of them, but it doesn't do damage to each player. We're going to want to have a few of these, like kind of pick and choose. Blasphemous Act doesn't deal damage to players either. So we're going to want to be able to have some of all of these effects in our deck. I've decided to change the art. It used to be Vigor in the background. Now I want you to keep all of these board wiping, blasphemous acting, fault line, earthquake effects all in the back of your head as we explain everything, because it's about to get great. How about a classic with Blasphemous Act? Boros Reckoner. Huh. Whenever Boros Reckoner is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target creature or player. So when we have a Blasphemous Act, we can just redirect 13 damage. Boros Reckoner is also a really great attacker because it can just redirect a lot of damage. Plus, it's a theme of the deck. That's what Saskia wants us to do. He just feels right. And if I'm going to include Boros Reckoner, I'll include Spitmare as well, or even Stuffy Doll. You know, with all of these on the battlefield, if I were to say, I don't know, play a fault line for 10, that would be so much fun. I would love to do that. And also, what's really fun as well is assembling the combo. How about Stuffy Doll Pariah's Shield? Pariah's Shield is 5 mana and equipment and has 3 equips, so this is 8 to get onto a creature. That sounds awful. But all damage that would be dealt to you is dealt to equipped creature instead. So if you just have Pariah's Shield on a Stuffy Doll, it just automatically redirects to an opponent. If you have it on Boros Reckoner, you can just keep throwing damage all the way through him over and over again. I don't think that this combo is very good or competitive, but it certainly is hilarious. And by the way, there's like a crying man on a weird shield with like spider legs on it. I really want to play that card. Coal Hauler Swine and Mogmaniac are also creatures that have this cool ability of redistributing damage. If you want to go deep on that synergy with Saskia, I think that they could be cool inclusions as well. So I just talked about some creatures that can throw damage around, others that are resilient to damage, and some big damaging effects. So Arcbond really belongs in this deck because it can turn any creature into one of these damage throwers. Choose target creature. Whenever that creature is dealt damage this turn, it deals that much damage to each other creature and each player. So again, this will just throw damage around if you play it in the right situation, taking everyone down a notch, killing a bunch of creatures, and it could grow some of your own creatures. And Chandra's Ignition. Target creature you control deals damage equal to power to each other creature and each opponent. Chandra's Ignition is nice because it hits all the opponents. And remember, we are going to have big creatures in this deck, so it could be really nice to have this boom ignition effect, dealing damage to everyone. And remember, our creatures should be resilient to these types of effects. So I've mentioned only a few synergies with throwing all this damage around. Yes, we want to lower everyone's life total so combat becomes more relevant. Yes, I would love to Blasphemous Act with Vigor on the battlefield, pumping up every other creature gigantic. But a secret dream of mine is to cast Blasphemous Act into an active Hornet's Nest, giving myself 13 Hornets that will dominate the battlefield. I'm super excited. I want to do it. But no, another pretty resilient threat has got to be Seki Season's Guide. This does not give you flying Death Touch Hornets. I'm sorry, guys, it doesn't. It doesn't. But it does give you little spirits, and then you can kind of cash those spirits in for getting Seki back from the graveyard. So he can be very resilient, and that's what we want, resilient threats. So there's a lot of damage going everywhere. And if damage is going to come at me, then I want a flying moose spirit to protect me. Purity, 3 white. Again, guys, we're not worrying about the mana. Don't worry, it'll all be fine. We're going to have perfect mana. For this 6/6 elemental incarnation, it flies. And if a spell or ability would deal damage to you, prevent that damage, you gain life equal to the damage prevented this way. So all that damage, the arc bonds that are getting thrown around, the rolling earthquakes, all of it changed over into life. How about Darian? He will change that damage into soldiers. You're going to take the damage and you're going to weaponize it. How about Vengeful Archon? You can pay X and turn that damage into damage at your opponent. Very flavorful with Saskia. So again, with all of these damage effects, the Rolling Earthquakes, the Arc Bomb, Oh, I have not introduced you guys to Heartless Hitotsugu. Let me say that again. Heartless Hitotsugu. 3 red for a 4/3 Legendary Ogre Shaman. Tap! Deals damage to each player to half that player's life total, rounded down. This guy just taps and boom, takes away half your life. By the way, everyone's, including yourself. Now, we do want everyone's life total to drop at the table, making combat more relevant, but Heartless Hitotsugu and Purity, you will gain the life instead. What about with Darien? It does deal damage to you. What if you were to just go from 40 to 20 but get 21 once? Heartless Hitotsugu, you are the new lieutenant of this deck. I have a few more resilient creatures with Protean Hydra and Undergrowth Champion. In the right situations, they can be great attackers and also absorb some of these board wiping effects. I don't want a lot of Infect, maybe just, I don't know, a little Infect. I want to share with you a card that wins me a lot of games that I just don't see played very often. I don't know, maybe it's because other people aren't huge jerks like me. Let me share with you Tainted Strike. 1 black for an instant, target creature gets +1/+0 and gains Infect until end of turn. Oh, not only does this work on your own huge creatures attacking your opponent, hopefully, by the way, you can attack them and Saskia will then copy it, killing 2 opponents. Oh, I can only imagine. But also, let's say that opponent 1 is attacking opponent 3 with a gigantic creature. Oh, look, opponent 3 isn't blocking opponent 1's creatures. Oh, how interesting is that? Tainted Strike! Okay. Grafted Exoskeleton. Turn any big creature into a big problem. And Glistening Oil. Not as good as the first 2, but definitely interesting and super creepy to have the oil piercing up through the eyeballs. Let's keep these 3 cards in mind because they can go on any creature, including, I don't know, Boros Reckoner. I know, you guys all imagined a Grafted Exoskeleton getting attached to like Vigor or some gigantic creature that's going to trample over. But I want something a little bit more janky and awesome. I want a Grafted Skeleton, my Boros Reckoner, and then Blasphemous Act someone with Infect damage. That's what I want! Or I just want to block something big and then shoot someone with Infect. I love it. Or Spite Mare, or Stuffy Doll. Could you imagine an infectious Stuffy Doll? I would be so happy about that. But one of the best things to do with an Infect creature has got to be Chandra's Ignition. You ignite that creature, dealing wither damage to all of your opponent's creatures, and your own, but whatever. And theoretically, it could deal poison damage to each opponent in turn, just wiping out the board. It's a very fun combo to get off. It's definitely rewarding if you do it at one point in time in your career. Especially because it's not easily put together in this deck. You kind of have to, like, I don't know, exoskeleton something big and then have it wait around and then Chandra's Ignition and hope it doesn't die. I feel like if you can pull off that many cards interacting together, you deserve to sort of blow up the world with Infect. I'm not going to list all of the little Infect creatures that you could throw in there to make combat a little bit more relevant, but I am going to mention Skittles, because he's very powerful, having Regenerate and Haste. And Evasion, by the way. And Phyrexian Crusader, because he has First Strike and Infect, which will wither your opponents, making combat with him very difficult, along with protection from red and white. This means that the Phyrexian Crusader can oftentimes get in against an opponent, and hopefully Saskia can copy that Infect damage to another opponent. I mean, as long as we're talking Infect, let's just Blightsteel Colossus someone, and that will certainly make them pay attention to creature combat. Let's turn those creatures sideways. By the way, that guy's hand is a rocket-powered spear. Curse of Bloodletting. You enchant a player, and if a source would deal damage to the enchanted player, it deals double damage to that player instead. It's like a huge screw you to one player. I really like it, especially with Saskia, because you could just curse the same player, Saskia, and then you can attack them and deal like quadruple damage. In fact, dealing damage in multiples sounds great. How about gratuitous violence? Whenever a creature you control would deal damage to a creature or player, deals double damage. So Saskia doubles damage in a way, but gratuitous violence and Curse of the Bloodletting can just get out of control. I mean, we can play Dictate of the Twin Gods or a lot of other abilities that double damage, but this deck is not very good at controlling the board. It's more about turning things sideways, so be very careful if you play a symmetrical effect by like Dictate. Of course, if we're talking about double damaging, why not just talk about Gisela, the magical angel that doubles damage to your opponents while having your own. And I can't talk about Gisela without her best friend Aurelia. It's actually not her best friend. They just like look like their best friend. Sigurd is clearly Gisela's best friend there. Aurelia basically gives you more than one attack phase. And if this deck is about attacking, we're going to throw Aurelia in there. And we are not going to look back at that mana cost. Red, red, white, white. Nope. We're, again, going to have perfect mana, guys. We can make our relevant creatures unblockable with Whispersilk Cloak and Trailblazer's Boots. Siege Behemoth is a gigantic hexproofing beast, but also he can kind of give pseudo-unblockable because whenever he's attacking, each creature you control can assign its damage as though it weren't blocked. So all these creatures that have triggers when they deal combat damage can just auto get through when a Siege Behemoth's on the battlefield. Along with a new addition, Stonehoof Chieftain. He's a gigantic 8/8 for 8. He has trample. He has indestructible. Those are attacking stats. And whenever another creature you control attacks, it gains trample and indestructible. This guy gives the keywords we want to our team. I also want to mention Cauldron of Souls. It's another inclusion that's going to be in the Commander 2016 product, and it is great. It allows a lot of your creatures to attack, and you can just Cauldron them back. Again, you want to create situations that let your big dudes turn sideways. As long as we're getting damage through, let's talk about some classics. How about Dune Brood Nephilim? This original null blue god dude frog horror vomit monster. Anyways, if he ever deals damage to an opponent, he will vomit up a bunch of 1/1s equal to the number of lands you control. That's a very powerful effect. But I think I'd prefer something that does a little bit more with combat damage. How about Hydra Omnivore? For only 6 mana, you get an 8/8. And if this guy ever connects with an opponent for combat damage, it will copy all that damage and send it out to all of your opponents. And with Saskia, that can hit someone for 16. I mean, Hydra Omnivore at a big table can do a ton of damage. It just gets spread out. Again, we do want to spread out our damage, make combat relevant again. Hydra Omnivore can deal a lot of damage, but often the biggest guy at the table is going to be Malignus. 3 red for a star. Malignus's power and toughness are each equal to half the highest life total among your opponents rounded up. So often Malignus is a 20/20 4/5. Do you know what we could do? We should go ahead and double that up to a 40/40. I mean, just because. Xenagos, God of Revels. He will double the power and toughness of your creatures equal to their power, making them even huger. Enough with big dudes. I think I've covered them a lot. How about sneaky dudes? How about Hypnotic Spectre and Abyssal Spectre? One of the great things is that these were a little bit older when they were written, and so they're templated not with the deals combat damage. When Hypnotic Spectre deals damage to an opponent, that player discards a card at random. So if Hypnotic Spectre comes down on 3 and then you play Saskia on 4, You can attack someone with Hypnotic Spectre, and Saskia will copy that damage, dealing it to another opponent, and both of them have to discard a card at random. Plus, he's super mean, and I love it. In all this talk of attacking, I have to mention Pathbreaker Ibex and Craterhoof Behemoth. They are huge threats and game winners on their own. If you want to make your deck more competitive, you should probably have a Craterhoof Behemoth in it. I might leave it out of my deck personally because I feel like I win too often with Craterhoof Behemoth, and I want to try something else. I think I want Saskia to copy some Infect damage, or I want to Boros Reckoner someone to death. And so I might hamstring myself a little bit by leaving the Craterhoof out. I think Trample and Lifelink are going to be very important keywords in this deck. We're going to want to be able to get our damage through to our opponents in spite of our gigantic creatures. And also, we're dealing a lot of incidental damage to ourselves, so gaining a little life here and there is going to give us a lot of sustain, so we can rebuild and attack with more creatures. That's why Behemoth Sledge and Luxodon Warhammer really belong in this deck. We want to attack, attack, attack. And they make small creatures real threats. Along with Basilisk Collar, it doesn't have trample, but on a smaller creature, Death Touch can be very, very annoying. Not to mention, what about on that Heartless-Headed Sugu that we talked about? Oh, this is magical. This guy with Lifelink is hilarious. And as long as he's in the deck, and I think Lifelink is great, how can we not put them together so they can be best friends and make me so happy? How about Arc Bond? Oh man, an Arc Bond on a creature with Lifelink? It just sends damage everywhere, and then you gain a tremendous amount of life. I'm so excited. This Chandra's Ignition too. A lifelinking creature that just, it deals all the damage. I really want to pull off some of these interesting synergies. And by the way, all of these cards have synergy with other things. We want our creatures to have lifelink. We want to have Heartless Hitotsugu lower everyone's ability. We want Arc Bond to go off and wipe the board and have Vigor, put a bunch of counters on stuff, and our phantom creatures to, not take damage, and all of this stuff works so well together. We're not going to stop there with lifelink. How about True Conviction, Whip of Erebos, and Vault of the Archangel? In fact, how about Rush of Vitality if we're really looking for it? I mean, a creature being indestructible and giving them lifelink could be relevant. A few lands that could be relevant, like Kessig Wolfrun, boosting a creature's power and giving it trample. Or how about Glacial Chasm, which could protect yourself from these symmetrical damage effects that are bringing the whole table down. Or Maze of Ith. This could allow your own creatures to attack with impunity, and then you can remove them from combat when maybe there's an unfavorable block or a combat trick. So I've already listed a lot of equipment as I've gone through this deck tech. The Grafted War Gear, the Luxodon Warhammer, the Whisper Silk Cloak, and I just want to pay attention to one more. Stoneforge Mystic and Godo Bandit Warlord can fetch you those equipments. I was really impressed when I saw the deck lists for these precons. I thought that they were very interesting and they pushed the boundaries in some ways, and I think one way that was really excellent was the inclusion of a Sunforger and a Sunforger package that's kind of relevant. I think opening up new players to this kind of synergy is really great and interesting, because they'll see the Sunforger and they'll be like, wait a second, it works with all of these cards, and then maybe they'll go out of their way and look for other cards that work with Sunforger, and it's like a little scavenger hunt for synergy, and that's the kind of gameplay I want to see in my commander decks. So in this deck I have a Sunforger as well, getting Naya Charm, which can tap all creatures target player controls, dealing a lot of damage. Boros Charm, giving double strike, protecting your stuff with indestructible. Crackling Doom, which will crackle things to death. I mean, Wizards was great and included these cards in their commander precons, making a very powerful Sunforger package. I, on the other hand, want it because it can instantly get Arc Bond. And Arc Bond is something that we really want to do. Also, I'm not going to lie, giving something +4/+0 is pretty sweet. That was my deck tech for Saskia the Unyielding, and it was filled with gigantic creatures that crashed into your opponents and spread damage all over the place. It made things huge and it got damage through. But also, it got damage through in a much more interesting way. It had spells that lowered everyone's life at the same time. It spread damage around to different players. It redirected damage, and Saskia herself can sort of double the damage to a single opponent, making her very political as well. This has been another Deck Tech by Jumbo Commander. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like my videos, please consider subscribing so you can get updates on when new ones come out. And there will be a lot of new videos on this Commander 2016 product. I hope to see you guys soon. Bye-bye.